What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down how you can get a perfect throwing motion. So I hope this video helps you guys out. Hope it could teach you a few new things. But also, fellas, if you're a QB and you guys would like to train with us this offseason, we are going to be traveling out to 14 more states across the country for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camps. Next up on our camp tour, we'll be coming out to Orlando, Florida. That camp is completely sold out. But then we will be coming out to Phoenix, Arizona, Charlotte, Dallas, the DMV, St. Louis, Honolulu, Boston, Cleveland, Austin, Seattle, Newark, Denver, and Los Angeles, California. So if you guys are local to one of those cities, would like to get some work in with us for 2 days, 8 hours of QB training, check out that very first link in the description below. We would love to have you out to one of our camps. Let's get started with this video. So first things first that I want to talk about here, we're going to be showing a bad example of throwing form from Tyler Huntley. Now, this is a tough example. He's in the pocket, he's moving around, but it's good for everybody to learn how the body works and how your throwing mechanics work biomechanically, right? Now, one thing I want to make clear, everybody's got different throwing mechanics. There are no two quarterbacks that are built the same, that have maybe the same type of body frame identically. So it's unrealistic to expect all quarterbacks to throw a certain way. Everybody throws the ball differently, but there are mechanical aspects of all the best guys in the world that you can try to mimic to make yourself that 1 to 5% better, which is what we are searching for at the quarterback position. So this is a throw here that misses low from Tyler Huntley. Now, right off the get, I'm pretty sure all of you can identify that his base in the pocket is extremely wide. So we're going to break down his base and what that causes his body to do, his throwing motion to do, and then we're going to look at Cade Klubnik, who's got a smooth motion, and he's a quarterback at Clemson for next year. So let's look at this example. When he's in the pocket, I want you to see where his back foot is located, extremely wide outside of his frame. Now, as a quarterback, when it comes to your throwing mechanics, your throwing motion, it is built from the ground up. It starts with the legs, it goes to the hips, and then it goes to the shoulders, and then it goes to your arm. So if your base is off, you are not going to have the smoothest upper half release. There's always a cause and effect. So I think when Huntley throws this ball here, everybody can say, oh, he's got a crazy eye release point, his elbow ripped down, and his head leaned out of it, right? Now, a good quarterback coach understands that that is not the source of the problem. The problem is not that Tyler Huntley leans. The problem is that he is not able to generate rotational force from his hips, and he is not able to effectively transfer his weight from his lower body. And that comes from his base. So when we throw in the pocket, obviously my power comes from my legs and it comes from my hips. You have to be able to think of it like your spine is straight and you are just rotating down an axis with your back hip. The hip has to rotate through before the ball rotates through and before your shoulders rotate through. It's kind of like hitting a baseball. When baseball players go back with the bat, what do? They pivot off their back foot, they squish the bug, and that rips the bat through, right? So same thing when throwing a football. I want to be able to get my front foot down. I want my hips to rotate through, and I want my shoulders to stay loaded back when that front foot gets down. They call that hip and shoulder dissociation. Shoulders stay back as the hips are going through when the front stride gets down. But when I have a wide base, it is incredibly hard for me to rotate at my hips. When my feet are outside of my frame, you guys could try it right now and stand up and stand in a super wide base and try to squish the back bug like a baseball player. You're probably going to feel a stretch in your groin. You're probably going to feel your back leg extend, and that's going to cause us to not rotate at my hips. So the key to being an efficient passer comes from having all of this is called a throwing sequence or kinetic chain. So when your front foot gets down, essentially, we want the hips to rotate through next. But if my hips can't rotate through, in my sequence, my shoulders are going to go ahead of my hips. And when your shoulders go ahead of your hips and you're at this plane with your foot trailing behind, which is solely from being in that overly wide base, that is going to cause a lot of issues. Because as quarterbacks, we're rotational athletes. We're going to rotate one way or the other. If you're not rotating at your hips, the only way you could get the ball there is by doing something with your front side, having a flawed front side. So doing what Huntley does, swinging his elbow down, leaning his head. Both of those are sources of power, but is that consistent power? No, because look at his release point. You see how overly high his release point is. So if he were to let go of this thing a little bit too early, what do you think would happen? It would probably sail high. He lets go of it a little bit late. What do you think happens? The ball goes low. Now, again, got a great tight end out there. Again, it's still a completion, but it's not mechanically sound. that's not going to be a 10 for 10 throw. That's maybe going to be like a 5 for 10 throw. And that's honestly not good enough. Now, again, Tyler Huntley's extremely talented. He plays in the NFL. It's just a good example for you guys to see. And he probably doesn't do this. But in this specific example, his base got real wide, and this is the cause and effect of having the wide base. So where should his base be? That back foot should be located underneath his back shoulder. Reason for that is because now when your front foot gets down in your throwing motion and that back foot is a little bit closer, you have more of a narrower base, not super narrow, but more narrow. That back knee can turn through, that back hip can drive through. And when those things go through before the elbow and the shoulder, that takes away arm pain. You don't need to lean because now you have that rotational power from your hips. So I'm going to play this full speed, and then we're going to break down Cade Klubnik's throwing motion, which is a great motion for you guys to see because he really can rip this ball and he's very consistent. So this is a great up close look here from where his base is, where his back foot is, and how he's able to rotate through from his hips, which does not cause a lean, causes the release point to be in a great spot. So let's talk about it, right? So when he gets set on this throw, does it look like his base is super wide? No. His back foot is loaded underneath his shoulder. His back shin is straight. His knee is not caved inward. So this position right here, his weight loaded on the back half of his body, is going to allow a couple things to happen. Because remember, we talked about that throwing sequence and that kinetic chain. What needed to happen first? Your front foot needed to get down. Now, when you have a more narrow base, a lot of guys, what they will do is they will push off of this back foot, and that can cause an overstride. So it's very important that we get that stride into the grass, not as quickly as possible, but as timed up with my upper body as possible. So you see, when he's got his weight back, that allows you to, again, be able to get your hips through, but it also allows you to close your front side. A lot of times when quarterbacks have that overly wide base, they physically cannot rotate their front shoulder back into the first part of the motion. They call this the backstroke. And we're going to be talking about the backstroke and the next example I show from another quarterback. But when we go back, if my weight is distributed onto my front side, I physically can't close my front shoulder, preventing me from getting to that dissociation position, which, like we said, was separating the hips from the shoulders. So we need to make sure that my weight is back so my hips can go, but also so I could stay loaded with my shoulders. So now his front foot gets down. Now, what's the next step? This throwing sequence. Remember, front foot gets down, then hips, then shoulders, then ball. So now his front hip needs to go. He is shifting weight from his back quad. He is transferring weight to his front leg. And you see how that front hip is able to rotate through. He's able to maintain a slight bend. His hips are going through. And watch what that does to his upper half. That keeps him on the throwing line. That doesn't cause the dip out of there. So now his shoulders can stay level and his hips can stay level. So for a consistent and accurate release point, like we said, in the last example, Tyler Huntley missed real low because he was coming down on the ball because his release point was super high. And that was because he dipped his head and pulled his elbow down. Now, the good spot to be at, you want to obviously keep your head level, you want to keep your shoulders level, and you want to keep your front hand somewhere by your collarbone. A lot of people call that staying square. Now, I can't get to that square position if my lower half is flawed. And that's where so many quarterback coaches go wrong. Guys, if you're seeing a quarterback coach and he could tell you what you're doing wrong, but he can't tell you why you're doing it wrong, you should probably move on or look for something better. Because at the end of the day, it's like in like the medical field, right? Like I have back pain, but usually back pain isn't caused from my back hurting. It could be caused from my hips. It could be caused from something else. It could be caused from my neck. There's always a cause and effect, very similar to the throwing position or throwing mechanics, I should say. Yeah, he dips his head and pulls his elbow down, but why? Why did he do that in the last clip? And it was because of his base. So now Klubnik's got a good base. His hips are able to rotate through, so it's easier to stay level. It's easier to keep your eyes level. It's easier to keep your front hand by your frame, which keeps your release point inside your frame. All of this is so we can get to extension. Your release point can't be way wide. It can't be way high because you cannot extend. Extension is that wrist flick. So many quarterbacks, whenever a quarterback is missing on a throw, they'll just go, or quarterback coaches will say, oh, hey, just flick your wrist more. It's like, what the hell does that mean? Like, how am I supposed to flick my wrist more? We have to know that it's from the hips, from the weight transfer, from the upper body. Those are the things that helps me get to extension and helps me flick my wrist more. Now, again, like I said, it's all based on the lower half, and that's why he's able to finish square, he's able to extend, and he's able to finish on this throw being very mechanically sound. That is textbook right there, fellas. So remember, to get a perfect throwing motion, not everybody needs to get to this like perfect L that he's at. And we're going to talk about that in the next clip, why you don't want to lift to the vertical 90. But again, it's all about timing, hips, sequence. You get that back foot under your frame so we could rotate, so I could get my hips to go. I take a short front stride, my hips bring the shoulders and the ball through. You see how when he throws, the ball is chasing his hip. That is where we want to be. Let's play this thing again, full speed one more time. Again, Klubnik's got a very, very smooth throwing motion that I feel we all can learn from. Great job keeping his weight back. Great job separating the upper from the lower half. Again, when you start paying attention, fellas, every single elite quarterback does these things. They all throw the ball in different ways, but they all have the right timing and the right throwing sequence. Okay, so now, one of the things that everybody loves to talk about is like the backstroke of the motion. Do you have to get to a perfect 90? Do you have to get to a perfect L? And this is going to be an example from a quarterback. Now, like we said, there's always a cause and effect, right? There's always a cause and effect to your motion, and it usually starts with your lower body. So we're going to be showing a bad example here from a quarterback. Now, again, I don't mean to knock this quarterback because he's a high school kid. Hopefully he's watching this, and hopefully this is a free lesson for him, right? But this is what you want to try to avoid, and the next example is going to be what you want to try to do. And I'm going to be showing two specific examples from Will Letts, and then I'm going to be showing another example from Kyler Murray. So let's watch it full speed. Let's watch what he does. So this is that typical lift to 90 degrees quarterback. So old school way of teaching things is that, you want to hold the ball up high and tight, and you want to lift the ball to 90 degrees because that's faster. Now, the only issue with when you lift the ball to 90 like this is that, number one, if you spread your chest, like if you go both arms to 90, there is no dissociation, which means there is no torque. Quarterback's a rotational athlete, right? So as a rotational athlete, you need to be able to generate torque. You know who else is a rotational athlete? Golfers, baseball players, tennis players, right? So we used the baseball example before. When you're in your batter's stance, your bat's here, do you just bring the bat through? No, you stay closed with your shoulder, you keep the bat back, and you pivot off of your back toe. The hips will bring the bat all the way through. Same thing. It's the same concept to be able to throw with velocity and consistency. But when we lift to 90 like this, the only problem is your shoulder opens. So do we have any torque? No. So when your front stride gets down because you did not close the shoulder, you did not have any kind of backstroke, what's going to happen here is that your shoulders are going to be ahead of your back hip, regardless if your base is in a good position or not. You could have the Cade Klubnik mechanics, back foot under the frame, weight is back, but if you just spread open to 90, you're not going to be able to get your hips involved. The elbow and the shoulder is going to beat the back hip and the back foot. And that puts a lot of pressure on the elbow and a lot of pressure on your shoulder. And again, the main thing, fellas, we got to keep my arm healthy. I got to be efficient, but I also have to keep my arm healthy. So when he does this, what do you think his source of power will be? Probably ripping open the front shoulder, ripping down the elbow, or dipping the head, right? So watch what he does. See how he dips his head out of there. Where's the head going? Head's going to the left. Where's the arm going? Outside of his frame, and he is coming across his body, which will cause that ball to probably either miss to the right or miss to the left. And again, a lot of people will just tell him, like this is probably what his quarterback coach tells him, hey, don't lean. Hey, don't lean your head out of the throw. Don't do it. And then if you really focus on not leaning your head, you'll get it. But if you have the same throwing mechanics and you don't change your sequence and your timing, it's going to feel so awkward. You're going to feel like you have absolutely no power on the ball. And that's not good. We need to have power on the ball because that's what you need to play at the next level. So how he could fix all of this, and remember, we talk about it. There's always that cause and effect. Think about where his base is. Look at his back foot. You see how wide it is. You see how his back knee is caved inward. His weight is distributed onto his front side, not onto his back side, like that Cade Klubnik example. So do you think he could even if he wanted to, even if he tried, with this type of base, with this type of weight distribution, do you think he could close his front side and get to that backstroke position? Probably not, because all of his weight wouldn't allow him to. He's even trying to. He's trying to close the front side, but because his weight was forward, that doesn't let him close his front shoulder, just like the last example we talked about. So he has no option but to open up to 90 and then to throw and dip his head and lean out of it, because that's the only source of power that he has, because he can't get that dissociation. So what I would do to correct him, I would say you want to make sure that this back foot, knee should not cave in like this. Your back shin should be straight. You should have your weight loaded on the back side. You should be light with your front foot, because now when you drive off of this back quad, you shift your weight forward, you're actually going to be able to close your shoulders as you do that. When your weight stays loaded back, it is so much easier to rotate your front side. It is so much easier to rotate with your upper half when your weight's loaded on your back leg. But when you're front side heavy, you guys could all stand up and try this. Stand up and put 70 to 80% of your weight on your front foot, whether you're a lefty or a righty, and try to rotate your shoulder back, like really turn. You can't do it, but try to sit with 70% of your weight on your back leg and try to rotate your front shoulder. It's much easier to rotate. And that rotation with the upper half combined with hip rotation through from the lower half, that's torque and that's power. Not opening up. But again, I don't blame the kid. I blame the quarterback coach who's not telling him what to do and not telling him the correct cause and effects, because this is something that kids can learn. I've seen kids learn this from 8 years old all the way up to 20 plus years old in college. Everybody can learn this if you make it simple enough and you could diagnose the problem that quarterbacks have. Let's play this again. Now, going to show an example from probably the smoothest motion I have ever seen. And again, it doesn't have to be exactly like this, but we're going to talk about this. Because how would you rather throw? Like the example before or like this right here? So you see when he goes to throw, how smooth that is, right? How smooth he goes through it to throw. So let's talk about some differences here. And again, I don't mean to knock the kid in the last example. I don't know who he is. I just saw the clip on Twitter, and I just thought that it would be great to share with you guys because I know a lot of you have the same problems. So when Lutz goes to throw, where's his weight? Back leg. Where's his shin? Completely straight, and he is not caved inward. So he's loaded on that backside. So what does that allow him to do? That's going to allow his hips to fire. That's going to allow him to close his front shoulder. So you see what he does. Closes the front shoulder. You see how he gets to some kind of backstroke. It does not have to be a perfect L. It could be any kind of backstroke, just not super low and not lifting to 90. Now what happens? Front stride's getting down and his weight is able to stay back. His shoulders are able to stay back. Now because his back foot was under his frame, watch what his hips are able to do. Rotate through, and you see how the ball is trailing his back hip. And look at his spine. Stays completely straight. Look where his shoulders are. Completely level. Eyes are completely level. He's staying square with the upper body. And there's always that cause and effect. It starts from this right here, fellas. Can you get your weight back? Can you rotate your shoulders back as the stride goes down? And can you let those hips shoot you through? We will not need to dip. We will not need to lean if I can get to there. Let's play this again, full speed one more time. Great example from Will Lutz showing us how that's probably the smoothest motion I've ever seen. I'm going to be dead honest with you guys. Really excited to see where he goes in the draft this year. So now, next example here I want to show from Kyler Murray, just because I want to showcase how everybody's different. And does he get to that perfect L? No. Nose of the ball is kind of tilted down. He's one of those guys that has maybe a longer release. You see how his release point, he doesn't get that a ton of external rotation where the ball dips behind his head. He's throwing, and again, he's got a higher release slot. He doesn't have that sidearm slot that's real popular. Everybody's different, fellas. You don't need to mimic somebody's motion. You need to mimic the timing. That is correct. You need to mimic the hip rotation, the correct base. But when it comes to the arm, everybody's built different. Kyler's built different than Josh Allen. Josh Allen's built different than Lamar Jackson. Patrick Mahomes is built different than Tom Brady. Everybody has a different body type. Nobody's identical. People have similar aspects of their throwing motion, but nobody has the exact same throwing motion. And that's what I want to try to get across to you guys, and I want to make you guys understand. Let's watch the thing again here. Again, great example for Kyler Murray. Have your own motion, but try to mimic the things that the top guys in the world can do. All right, fellas, really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. Always appreciate the feedback. It's always great to hear from you guys. Really appreciate everything that you guys do for this channel. And again, fellas, if you'd like to work with us in 14 different states this offseason, we are going to be traveling out to the following states listed below. If you want some more information, how you can sign up, check out that very first link below. I'll see you guys next time.